All right, welcome in everybody to the deep dive. Today we're going to do a deep dive into some Major League Soccer action.
Yeah, sounds good. Week 5 coming up. Got some interesting games to break down.
We do. We've got, I guess we'll call them matches, right? We got St. Louis City taking on Austin FC, and then we've also got Portland Timbers going up against Houston Dynamo.
Yeah, those are the two we're focusing on.
Yeah, and we got some pretty intense source material here. We've got some, what looks to be pretty high-level analytical stuff.
Oh, yeah, this is really getting into the nitty-gritty of the data. They've got some serious modeling going on here. It's the kind of stuff you might see, driving those sports betting predictions and algorithms.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of take a look at, I guess, all of the different pieces that they're looking at. So we'll look at the numbers, we'll look at the, injury reports, and we'll even look at how the betting odds are shaken out.
Yeah, and try to pull out, I guess, what we think are the most important insights and probabilities to give people, whether they're, hardcore fans or just casual viewers, just a better sense of how these games might unfold.
Yeah, so let's dive right into that first match, St. Louis City versus Austin FC. And just looking right at it, the models are giving St. Louis City a pretty good chance to win this one. Like, it looks like a significant edge.
Oh, yeah. They've got a, let me see, 56.8% chance of winning, according to the models. And if you drill down even further, the most likely scoreline, it seems, is a 1-0 victory for St. Louis, with that specific outcome, that 1-0 having a 22.1% probability.
So they're saying St. Louis is going to win. Probably not going to be a ton of goals in this one.
Right. It seems like a low-scoring affair.
And why is that? Is that mostly because of St. Louis's, we always hear about how good their defense is?
That's definitely a huge factor. I mean, they've only let in 1 goal in their first 5 matches. That's the best defensive record in MLS right now.
Yeah, that's absolutely insane. And their goalkeeper, Berkey, is obviously he's the one who's, on the highlight reels making these crazy saves. But is it more than just him?
Right. That's what I was going to say. It's really impressive when you look at the data. It's not just, him having a blinder every game. Their entire defensive structure looks incredibly solid.
Okay, so even if Austin FC was playing, at their peak, it seems like they would have a tough time breaking down this St. Louis defense.
Right. Exactly. If you look at things like expected goals against, St. Louis is way below league average, which just shows how well they're organized and how few quality chances they're giving up.
Okay, so St. Louis looking pretty good, but even the best teams, they have weaknesses, right? So is there anything that we see here that could potentially cause some problems for St. Louis in this matchup?
Well, there is one potential issue they're dealing with. Midfielder Lowen is, he's listed as questionable for the match.
Okay, and how big of a deal is that? What does he bring to the team?
So he's kind of the engine of their midfield, He's the one who really connects the defense to the attack. If he's not able to play, that could definitely impact St. Louis's ability to create chances.
So even if, Austin's not playing great, they're struggling to bit themselves, if Lowen's out, it just makes it that much harder for St. Louis to break them down.
Exactly. It kind of levels the playing field a little bit.
Okay, and speaking of Austin, yeah, it doesn't seem like they're having the best start to the season, right?
No, not really. I mean, they've only managed to score 4 goals in their 5 matches so far. And to make matters worse, their defense has been hit hard with injuries. Cascante and Vizenen both out, and those are 2 key defenders for them.
So they're struggling to score, and now their defense is weakened. Not a great combination.
Not at all. It really puts them at a disadvantage going into this match.
Okay, so we've got St. Louis with this super strong defense, but a potential midfield concern. And then we've got Austin, who can't seem to score, and now they're missing key defenders. So when you put all of that together, what's the overall takeaway from a purely statistical perspective?
Well, they actually have something called injury impact models. And what those models show is that St. Louis City has a plus 1.7 expected points edge in this matchup.
Okay, what does that expected points edge actually mean?
So it's basically a way of saying how many points a team should be expected to earn based on things like the quality of chances they create and the quality of chances they concede.
So even taking into account Austin's struggles and their injuries, the models are still saying St. Louis is likely to perform significantly better.
Exactly. That plus 1.7 edge is pretty substantial. It suggests they have a real advantage in this game.
Okay, so St. Louis looking good.
Yeah.
And it also seems like the models are pretty unified on one thing. This is probably not going to be a goal fest.
Yeah, that's another interesting point. All 7 of the statistical models we looked at are predicting under 2.5 goals for this match.
7 out of 7. That's pretty convincing.
Right. When you see that level of agreement across multiple different models, it really strengthens the conviction in that prediction. It's like they're all telling us the same story.
Okay, so for those of us who, maybe like to look at these probabilities and see where there might be some interesting betting opportunities, and even if you're not a bettor, it's still interesting to see where the data sees the most value, what jumps out.
Well, one thing that catches the eye is the St. Louis to win 2-0 market.
2-0. What does that mean exactly?
So 2-0 basically means St. Louis wins and Austin doesn't score any goals. A clean sheet for St. Louis, in other words. And the odds for that are around 3.12 right now. And what's interesting is that 6 out of the 7 models are also predicting a clean sheet for St. Louis.
So both the models and the betting odds seem to be leaning in the same direction.
Exactly. They both see a good chance of St. Louis keeping a clean sheet and winning the game.
And the source material even talks about how someone might think about managing their, bankroll if they were actually considering betting on some of these outcomes. Can you walk us through that a little bit?
Sure. They use something called Kelly adjusted sizing, which sounds complicated, but it's basically a way to try to optimize your bet sizes based on how confident you are in your edge.
Okay, so the more confident the models are, the more you might bet.
Exactly. So in this case, the suggestion is to allocate something like 6.3% of a hypothetical bankroll on a straight St. Louis win, 4.5% on under 2.5 goals, and 3.2% on the St. Louis win-to-nil. But a bigger takeaway here, I think, is that they really emphasize a disciplined approach to betting.
Right, it's not just about throwing money at whatever sounds good.
Exactly. It's about making informed decisions, managing your risk, and understanding that there's always going to be some variance in sports. You can't win them all.
All right, very smart. Let's shift gears now and talk about our second match, Portland Timbers hosting Houston Dynamo. This one looks a little different, right? Not quite as clear-cut as the St. Louis game.
Yeah, this one seems much more evenly matched according to the models. Portland has a slight edge, but it's not as significant.
Okay, so what's the most likely outcome that they're seeing here?
So the most likely outcome they're predicting is a 2-1 win for Portland, and that has an 18.7% probability. But right behind that is a 1-1 draw at 16.3%.
Okay, so yeah, much closer probabilities than we saw in the other game. It could really go either way. So what are the main factors that are making this one so much more, I guess, unpredictable?
Well, one interesting thing is that the AI models are actually leaning towards a higher scoring match in this one. They're suggesting that both teams to score and over 2.5 total goals are good bets.
So they're thinking this is going to be more of an offensive game, maybe more back and forth action.
Yeah, it seems like they're expecting both teams to have more opportunities to score in this one, maybe some defensive vulnerabilities on both sides as well.
Okay, and we also can't forget about, the good old unpredictable factor that always comes into play, especially in soccer, the weather.
Oh yeah, good point. The forecast for Portland is showing a 60% chance of rain and even some potentially gusty winds. And that kind of weather can really throw a wrench into things.
Yeah, you never know how those conditions are going to affect the game. It can make it a lot sloppier, a lot more unpredictable.
Exactly. It can affect the passing, the ball control, and just the overall flow of the game. So, yeah, the weather is definitely something to keep an eye on.
And on top of the weather, it looks like both teams are going to be missing some key players in midfield.
Yeah, that's right. Evander is out for Portland, and Herrera is out for Houston.
And how big of a deal are those absences?
Both of those guys are usually really important for their teams. They kind of control the tempo of the game, dictate the play from the middle of the park. So without them, it's possible that the midfield battle becomes a lot more open, a lot less structured.
Okay, so maybe that leads to more turnovers, more quick transitions, more scoring chances.
Potentially, yeah. It could definitely make the game more chaotic and unpredictable. And if we look at the defensive records of both teams, it seems to fit with this idea of more goals being scored.
Okay, fill us in. What are we seeing defensively?
Well, Houston has already conceded 8 goals in their 5 matches, which is, not great.
Yeah, that's a lot.
And Portland's defense, while it's not the worst in the league, it hasn't exactly been a fortress either. So all of this kind of points towards a game with more goals, a game where both teams have a decent chance of finding the back of the net.
All right, so to wrap things up for this Portland versus Houston game, what are the betting markets that the source highlights as having the most potential value?
Okay, so they're really focusing on over 2.5 total goals and both teams to score. And again, that's based on everything we've talked about, the defensive records, the midfield absences, the weather. They also suggest that this might be a good game for live betting.
Live betting, okay, interesting. So instead of placing your bets before the game, you wait and see how things are playing out.
Exactly. Because of all the unpredictable factors in this one, especially the weather, it might be smart to watch the first few minutes, get a feel for the flow of the game, and then decide where you think the value lies.
Okay, cool. So let's just do a quick recap of all of the AI-backed best bets that the analysis identified across both of these matches.
All right, so for St. Louis versus Austin, St. Louis to win at odds of around 2.0, under 2.5 total goals at odds of around 1.85, and St. Louis to win to nil at odds of approximately 3.2. For Portland versus Houston, the bets are both teams to score and over 2.5 total goals.
Perfect. And one last thing before we wrap up. The analysis really stresses the importance of betting responsibly, right? So regardless of whether people are actually placing bets or just following along, what are the key principles we should keep in mind?
Yeah, for sure. The big one is managing your bankroll wisely. A good rule of thumb is the 2% rule, which means you never risk more than 2% of your total betting capital on any single bet.
Okay, so don't go all in on one game no matter how confident you feel.
Exactly. And it's also important to remember that even with a statistical model that's, been very accurate in the past, this one has a 69.4% accuracy rate over 500 past matches. There's always going to be variance in sports. You can't predict everything perfectly.
Right. Upsets happen.
Yeah.
And even the best models can be wrong sometime.
Exactly. So bet responsibly, make smart decisions, and don't chase losses.
All right, great advice. So big picture, what have we learned about these two matches? For St. Louis City against Austin FC, all signs point to a low-scoring defensive battle.
Yeah, St. Louis is looking very strong defensively, but Austin's struggling to score and dealing with injuries.
And the models are pretty confident that St. Louis is going to come out on top. For the Portland Timbers versus Houston Dynamo game, it's a different story.
Yeah, this one looks like it could be a much more open and entertaining match with more goals and potentially some back and forth action.
Both teams have some defensive questions. Both are missing key midfielders. And then you throw in that unpredictable weather in Portland, and it really feels like anything could happen.
Exactly. It's a game that could go in a lot of different directions.
It really is. And, it's funny, when you look at how dominant St. Louis City has been defensively, it really makes you think about how much of an impact a truly elite defense can have in MLS. We always hear about the importance of attacking and scoring goals, but maybe a stifling defense is just as valuable.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Maybe we undervalue defense sometimes.
That's something to consider as we watch the rest of the season unfold. All right. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive, everybody.
Always pleasure.
See you next time.